this community since 1918. Service is our motto. The poor, the rich, the middle class and all are given the best of care and attention at all times. You have the privilege to select what you want. In your time of need, contact the capable, the competent, and the dependable staff of the Jwwilliams Funeral Home who is genuinely concerned with your care. At Jwwilliams Funeral Home, you are aptly served by the proprietor president, Deacon Arthur L. Parker, who continues the traditions and values set forth by the past president, Dr. Napoleon Williams. Your announcers for the Jwwilliams Funeral Home Sunday morning program are Deacon Arthur L. Parker, Reverend Isaac H. Owens, Mrs. Calandra Wilkerson Parker, Minister Frankie Harmon, Ms. Sandra Johnson, and Deacon Earl Clark, Jr.
Thank you, and good morning, friends. We come to you this morning to bring announcements, dedications, and songs. We certainly hope that your day may be brighter after listening to our program. The family of retired educator Miss Geneva Bridges of Powder Springs, Georgia. The family of Miss Mary Louise Trotman Trahan of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mrs. Linda Gail Bullock Jones of Cobb, Georgia. The family of Miss Juanita Cookie Jones of Cordele, Georgia, formerly of Rochelle, Georgia, would like to thank their many friends for the food, the flowers, the condolences, and all other expressions of sympathy and kindness shown to them during their hours of sorrow and bereavement during the past week. Retired educator Miss Geneva Bridges, age 76, of 4194 D-Floor Farm Drive, Powder Springs, Georgia, died Saturday, November 9th, at the Powder Springs Center for Nursing and Healing in Powder Springs, Georgia. The funeral service for retired educator Miss Geneva Bridges, age 76, was held Saturday, November 23rd, in the sanctuary of the Greater Gum Creek Baptist Church in Cordele, Georgia. The pastor, Reverend Joseph Hagerbrook, officiated. The burial followed in the churchyard cemetery. Survivors include her loving and devoted sibling, Mrs. Dorothy Hines, and her husband, Mr. Belton Hines, and Miss Helen Hart, both of Atlanta, Georgia. Mr. Frank Bridges and his wife, Mrs. Miriam Bridges of Brunswick, Georgia. Mr. Johnny Bridges and his wife, Mrs. Jeanette Bridges of Trenton, New Jersey. And Mr. Lloyd Bridges and his wife, Mrs. Deborah Bridges of Cordele, Georgia. Her beloved nephews, Mr. Timothy Bridges and Mr. Demetrius Wilson. A host of beloved nieces, nephews, many cousins, other relatives, and many sorrowing friends, to include Mr. Anthony West, survived retired educator Miss Geneva Bridges, age 76, of 4194 D-Floor Farm Drive, Powder Springs, Georgia. Mrs. Mary Louise Trotman Trahan, age 77, of 1107 East 8th Avenue, Cordele, Georgia, died Wednesday, November 13th, at the home of her beloved daughter in Atlanta, Georgia. The funeral service for Mrs. Mary Louise Trotman Trahan, age 77, was held Saturday, November 23rd, in the sanctuary of the Greater Morris Tabernacle Missionary Baptist Church in Cordele, Georgia. Dr. K.M. Williams, pastor, the Reverend Isaac H. Owens, pastor of the Mount Calvary Baptist Church, officiated. The burial followed at the Westview Cemetery in Cordele, Georgia. Survivors include her loving and devoted children, Mr. Anthony Troutman and his wife, Mrs. Leslie Troutman, Ms. Mary Trahan and Mr. Charles V. Trahan, all of Hollywood, Florida, Ms. Nicole R. Trahan and Ms. Anitra D. Trahan of Atlanta, Georgia, a host of beloved grandchildren and great-grandchildren, her beloved brothers, Mr. Robert Brown of Macon, Georgia, and Mr. John Trotman and his wife, Mrs. Sonia Trotman of Fort Valley, Georgia, a beloved uncle, Mr. L.C. McLeod of Cordele, Georgia, a host of beloved nieces, nephews, cousins, other relatives, and many sorrowing friends survive. Mrs. Mary Louise Troutman Trahan, age 77, of 1107 East 8th Avenue, Cordele, Georgia. Mrs. Linda Gail Bullock Jones, age 77, of 1141 Cobb Cheek Road, Cobb, Georgia, died Saturday, November 16th, at the Phoebe Sumter Medical Center in Americus, Georgia. The funeral service for Mrs. Linda Gail Bullock Jones, age 74, was held Saturday, November 23rd, in the sanctuary of the Pleasant Grove Baptist Church in Cobb, Georgia. The pastor, Reverend Sterling Verleen, officiated. The eulogy was delivered by the Reverend Mathis Wright. The burial followed in the churchyard cemetery. Survivors include a devoted and loving son, Mr. Charles F. Jones, a beloved daughter, Miss Linda Diane Jones, 9 beloved grandchildren, 9 great-grandchildren, a beloved brother, Mr. Raymond Bullock Jr., and his wife, Mrs. Anna Bullock, 4 beloved sisters, Miss Mika Bacon and her husband, Mr. Julius Bacon, Miss Joy Harden and her husband, Mr. Derek Harden, Miss Tracy Pitts, and Miss Virginia Bullock, a beloved uncle, Mr. Charles Parham, and his wife, Mrs. Martha Parham of Edenton, Georgia, 1 sister-in-law, Mrs. Bonnie Bullard of Vienna, Georgia, a host of beloved nieces, nephews, cousins, other relatives, and many sorrowing friends, to include Miss Norma Mays, Miss Phyllis Wright, and Miss Mary Jane Clark, survived Mrs. Linda Gail Bullard Jones, age 74, of 1141 Cobb Cheek Road, Cobb, Georgia. Miss Juanita Cookie Jones, age 60, of 409 West 7th Avenue, Cordele, Georgia, formerly of Rochelle, Georgia, died Thursday, November 14th, at Emory University Hospital in Atlanta, Georgia. The remains were cremated. Survivors include her loving and devoted children, Mr. Michael Jones, Miss Catherine Jones, and Mr. Isaac Jones, all of Cordele, Georgia. 6 beloved grandchildren, 2 great-grandchildren, a host of beloved nieces, nephews, cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Miss Juanita Cookie Jones, age 60, 409 West 7th Avenue, Cordele, Georgia, formerly of Rochelle, Georgia. Again, the family of retired educator Miss Geneva Bridges of Powder Springs, Georgia. The family of Miss Mary Louise Trotman Trahan of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mrs. Linda Gail Bullock Jones of Cobb, Georgia. The family of Miss Juanita Cookie Jones of Cordele, Georgia, formerly of Rochelle, Georgia, would like to thank their many friends for all of the many kindnesses shown to them during their hours of sorrow and bereavement during the past week. May God bless each of you is their prayer. The Jwwilliams funeral directors serving Cordele and Vienna were in charge of each of these arrangements during the past week. And now, it is certainly with the deepest regret that we make the following announcement. Mr. Buford Royal Sr., better known as Pete, age 90, of 206 West 18th Avenue, Cordele, Georgia, died Tuesday, November 19th at the Phoebe Putnam Memorial Hospital in Albany, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted wife, Mrs. Cora Lee Royal of Cordele, Georgia. His loving and devoted children, Mr. Buford Royal Jr. and his wife, Mrs. Mary Royal of Cordele, Georgia. Mr. Nathaniel Royal of Warner Robins, Georgia. Mrs. Queen Evans and her husband, Mr. Norman Evans of Birmingham, Alabama. Mrs. Brenda Green and her husband, Deacon Winford Green of Cordele, Georgia. Mr. Buford Ross of Orlando, Florida. Mrs. Lois Adams and her husband, Mr. Sean Adams of Jacksonville, Florida. Mr. Anthony West Jr. and his wife, Mrs. Dorothy West of St. Mary's, Georgia. Mrs. Rudine Warren and her husband, Mr. Benny Warren of Cordele, Georgia. And Mrs. Jacqueline Bond of Decatur, Georgia. A host of beloved grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren. His beloved and devoted sisters, Mrs. Etta Peacock of Cordele, Georgia, Mrs. Bertha Castro of Jacksonville, Florida, his twin, Miss Beulah Williams of Miami, Florida, his beloved brothers, Mr. Johnny Royal of Cordele, Georgia, and Mr. Bobby Royal and his wife, Mrs. Florence Royal of Miami, Florida, a beloved aunt, Mrs. Yvonne Kennedy of Cordele, Georgia, a host of beloved nieces, nephews, cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive Mr. Buford Royal Sr., better known as Pete, age 90, of 206 West 18th Avenue, Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Buford Royal Sr., age 90, will be held today, Sunday, November 24 at 10 a.m. in the chapel of the Jwwilliams Funeral Home in Cordele, Georgia. The Reverend Isaac H. Owens, pastor of the Mount Calvary Baptist Church, will officiate. The burial will follow at the Bethel Cemetery in Cordele, Georgia. Dr. James Wardell Bolton II, age 54, of 1800 Westland Drive, Macon, Georgia, died Sunday, November 17 at the Piedmont Hospital in Atlanta, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted wife, Mrs. Shafonda Taylor Bolton of Macon, Georgia. His beloved children, Mr. Jafari Bolton of Phoenix, Arizona, Mr. Quest Bolton of Miami, Florida, and Mr. Corey Brown and his wife, Mrs. Kathy Brown. One grandchild, his beloved and devoted mother, Mrs. Carolyn Perry Bolton of Cordele, Georgia. His loving sister, Mrs. Deanne Bolton of Chicago, Illinois. His beloved aunts and uncles, the Reverend Charles Perry Jr. and his wife, Mrs. Gail Perry of Byron, Georgia. Mrs. Angela Walker and her husband, Deacon Jesse Walker of Cordele, Georgia. Miss Martha Stokes of Mississippi, and Bishop Ernest Morrow of Miami, Florida. His beloved cousins, whom he treated like siblings, Miss Katrina Vine, Minister Pamela Slayton, Mr. Eric Perry and his wife, Mrs. Kimla Perry, Miss Trina Green and her husband, Mr. Richard Green, Miss Katrina McLeod, Minister Courtney Perry and his wife, Mrs. DeQuery Perry, Elder Terrence Walker and his wife, Mrs. Lachelle Walker, Mrs. Deidre Pennington and her husband, Mr. Elijah Pennington, Miss Jasmine Walker, and a host of other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Dr. James Wardell Bolton II, age 54, of 1800 Westland Drive, Macon, Georgia. The funeral service for Dr. James Wardell Bolton II, age 54, will be held today, Sunday, November 24th at 2 p.m. in the chapel of the Jwwilliams Funeral Home in Cordele, Georgia. His beloved cousin, Elder Terrence Walker, will deliver the eulogy. The burial will follow at the Sunnyside Cemetery in Cordele, Georgia. United States Army veteran, the Reverend Edward Bernard Childs, age 79, of 858 Shadow Ridge Drive, Southeast Atlanta, Georgia, died Tuesday, November 19th at Piedmont Hospital in Atlanta, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted wife, Mrs. Carrie W. Childs of Atlanta, Georgia, his beloved and devoted sisters, Mrs. Johnny Mae Eccles and Miss Eloise Turner, both of Orlando, Florida, Mrs. Mildred Henderson and her husband, Mr. Robert Henderson of Macon, Georgia, and Mrs. Louise Linkhorn of Unadilla, Georgia. His beloved brother, Deacon Robert L. Childs of Unadilla, Georgia. A beloved nephew who was raised as his brother, Mr. London Bobby Childs, and his wife, Mrs. Rosa Childs of Unadilla, Georgia. His beloved brother-in-law, Mr. Adam L. Williams, and his wife, Mrs. Irene Williams. His devoted nieces, Mrs. Brittany Childs and Miss Melissa Linkhorn, both of Atlanta, Georgia. His devoted friends and neighbor, Mr. Jonathan Patridge and Mr. Roland O'Neill, both of Atlanta, Georgia. A host of beloved nieces, nephews, cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. United States Army veteran, the Reverend Edward Bernard Childs, age 79, of 858 Shadow Ridge Drive, Southeast, Atlanta, Georgia. The funeral service for United States Army veteran, the Reverend Edward Bernard Childs, age 79, will be held Tuesday, November 26, at 11 a.m. in the sanctuary of the Forest Chapel Baptist Church in Pinehurst, Georgia. The pastor, Reverend Willie Green, will officiate. The burial with military honors will follow in the churchyard cemetery. Mrs. Emma Lee Morgan Collier, age 67, of 214 West 28th Avenue, Cordele, Georgia, died Tuesday, November 19th, at her residence in Cordele, Georgia. Survivors include her loving and devoted husband, Mr. Charles Collier of Cordele, Georgia, her loving and devoted children, Mr. Mika Collier and his wife, Mrs. Shamika Collier, and Mrs. Calandra Vicks and her husband, Mr. Jimmy Vicks, both of Hampton, Georgia. 6 beloved grandchildren, 1 great-grandchild, her beloved sisters, Mrs. Omi Jean Blunt of Chapel Hill, Florida, Mrs. Denise Presley of Cordele, Georgia, her beloved brothers, Mr. Eddie Morgan and his wife, Mrs. Jeanette Morgan, and Elder Gardner Morgan and his wife, Mrs. Beulah Morgan, both of Cordele, Georgia. A host of beloved nieces, nephews, cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mrs. Emma Lee Morgan Collier, age 67, of 214 West 28th Avenue, Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mrs. Emma Lee Morgan Collier, age 67, will be held on Saturday, November 30th at 10 a.m. in the sanctuary of the New Oak Grove Baptist Church in Cordele, Georgia. The pastor, Reverend W. Wilson, will officiate. The burial will follow at the Bethel Cemetery in Cordele, Georgia. Mr. Jack James Lane, Jr., age 77, of 162 Mitchell Street, DeSoto, Georgia, died Thursday, November 21st, at the Phoebe Sumter Medical Center in Americus, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted wife, Mrs. Lottie Young Lane of DeSoto, Georgia, Her loving and devoted children, Mr. Kerry Lane and his wife, Mrs. Jackie Lane of San Diego, California, Mrs. Michelle Perry and her husband, Mr. Wallace Perry of Leslie, Georgia, and Miss Nidra Lane of DeSoto, Georgia. 5 beloved grandchildren. A beloved sister, Miss Diane Watkins of Americus, Georgia. 2 beloved brothers, Mr. Frankie Lane and his wife, Mrs. Shirlene Lane of McDonald, Georgia, and Mr. Bobby Lane of Americus, Georgia. 5 beloved sisters-in-law, 3 brothers-in-law, a host of nieces, nephews, cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mr. James Lane Jr., age 77, 162 Mitchell Street, DeSoto, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. James Lane Jr., age 77, will be held on Saturday, November 30th, in the sanctuary of the Ship Chapel Baptist Church in Americus, Georgia. The pastor, Reverend Daniel Clinton, will officiate. The burial will follow at the Eastview Cemetery in Americus, Georgia. The public visitation will be Friday, November 29th, from 1 until 5 p.m. at the Jwwilliams Funeral Home. Mr. Wilman Lorenza Tyson, Sr., age 79, 144 Georgia Highway 308, Plains, Georgia, died Friday, November 22nd, at the Phoebe Putnam Memorial Hospital in Albany, Georgia. Survivors include his loving and devoted children, Mr. Wilman Tyson Jr., Mr. David Tyson, Miss Gloria Nicey Tyson, Miss Sylvia Power and her husband, Sir Christopher Power, Mr. Tony Tyson and his wife, Mrs. Calandra Tyson, Mr. Darren Tyson and his wife, Mrs. Tanya Tyson, Miss Stephanie Paul, Mr. Cedric Tyson, and Mr. Bradley Tyson and his wife, Mrs. Brock Tyson. His beloved grandchildren, great-grandchildren, his beloved and devoted sibling, Deacon Ariel Tyson and his wife, Mrs. Eloise Tyson, Mr. Lucius Tyson and his wife, Mrs. Annette Tyson, Mr. Chevy Tyson and his wife, Mrs. Isabel Tyson, Mr. Arthur James Tyson, Miss Katrina Harvey, Miss Leela Brown, and Miss Bernice Tyson, a host of beloved nieces, nephews, cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends, to include his special friends, Miss Gloria Tyson, his former wife and caregiver, and his honorary son, Mr. Keith Frederick, and his wife, Mrs. Pamela Frederick, survived. Mr. Wilma Lorenza Tyson, Sr., age 79, 144 Georgia Highway 308, Plains, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Wilma Lorenza Tyson, Sr., age 79, will be announced at a later date, pending the completion of the arrangements. The Jwwilliams funeral directors, serving Cordele and Vienna, are in charge of each of these arrangements during this week. Friends, that conclude our funeral notices for this morning. And as always, we do remind you concerning our pre-funeral arrangements planning available at the Jwwilliams Funeral Home, with packages available with a single pay, a 3-year pay, a 5-year pay, and a 10-year pay. So please stop by and talk with us concerning your pre-funeral needs. The Jwwilliams, and also whole life insurance is available at the Jwwilliams Funeral Home.
Thank you for your great love and blessings over our lives, our Heavenly Father. Thank you that your faith has no end, but it lasts for our you are in and you cover us as with the sheep. Our hands and bring in all given up these days. We pray to make a way and goodness and love, for a heart of wisdom to hear your voice, and a strong by and grace. We thank you for the message in our every day. So much for me with every commitment that we have our hearts. Yes, our family, our friends, and bless each time. And remember, all we have is because of you, for the blessings of giving us life. Jesus, amen. This prayer of thanksgiving, love, hope is shared with each of you and prayed by CEO management of the Jwwilliams Funeral Home. It is our prayer that each of you bless during the holiday season. Happy Thanksgiving. And now for our announcements. The Mount Moriah Baptist Church of Unadilla Faith Brittany observed today, Sunday, November 24th at 11 o'clock a.m. Everyone is invited to attend. Reverend Edward Lester is the pastor. Evangelistic Tabernacle Family Outreach Center, Vienna Mission Project to Asheville, North Carolina for hurricane relief will be collecting items along with I Hope Church of God Apostolic of Tifton. Volunteers are needed to help load and unload, as well as drivers are needed to help transport items. All items are needed by Friday, November 29th. For more information and a complete listing of all the items that will be needed, please contact Elder Lorene West at 229-425-1417. Again, the Evangelistic Tabernacle Family Outreach Center, Vienna Mission Project to Asheville, North Carolina for hurricane relief will be collecting items along with the I Hope Church of God Apostolic of Tifton. Volunteers are needed to help load and unload, as well as drivers are needed to help transport items. All items are needed by Friday, November 29th. For more information and a complete listing of the items that are needed, please contact Elder Lorene West at 229-425-1417. Elder Lorene West, National CO GA Missions President. The Gospel Stars of Lilly, Georgia will celebrate their 40th anniversary on Sunday, December 1st at 3 o'clock p.m. at Turkey Creek Baptist Church in Lilly. Everyone is invited to come and join in this celebration. The Friendship Baptist Church of Pinehurst annual Christmas program will be Wednesday, December 4th at 7 o'clock p.m. Sister Cassandra Askew, Secretary, Mother Nanny Burke, Church Mother, Reverend Joseph Atkins is the pastor. The Lebanon Baptist Church of Plains 104th Ushers Anniversary will be today during the 11 o'clock worship service. Deacon Darrell Walters will speak on the duties of an usher. Reverend Christopher O'Brien will deliver the sermon. Gleaner captains are Sister Edna Carter, Sister Alice Ruth Muff, and Sister Patricia Williams. Everyone is invited to attend. Deacon J.C. Bryant Jr. is the president. Deacon Eric Bryant is the chairman of deacons. Reverend Christopher O'Brien is the pastor. The Big Bethel Baptist Church of Americas will not have service today, November 24, due to renovation upgrades. Reverend Rod Hubbard is the pastor. Freedom Harvest Worship Center of Leslie will celebrate the 14th anniversary of its pastor, Dr. George Adaraso, on Sunday, December 1st at 2 o'clock p.m. Whole Truth Ministry and Pastor George Frank Muntz will be the special guest. Everyone is invited to attend. Dr. George Adaraso is the pastor. Zion Hope Baptist Church invites everyone to the installation service of Pastor-elect Reverend Wesley S. Ashton on Sunday, December the 8th at 3 o'clock p.m. Dr. K.M. Jwwilliams, pastor of Greater Mars Tabernacle Baptist Church, will deliver the installation sermon. Mother Bernice Wiley, Church Mother, Deacon James Cooper, Chairman of Deacons, Reverend Wesley S. Ashton, Pastor-elect. The St. John Baptist Church of Leslie will celebrate the 116th church anniversary and the 28th anniversary of Pastor Reverend Calvin James on Sunday, December 15th. Sunday school at 9 o'clock a.m., worship service at 10 o'clock a.m. Pastor Ferlin Tyson of New Zion and Shady Grove Baptist Church will be the guest minister. Dinner will be served. Reverend Calvin James is the pastor. The Zion Grove Baptist Church of Oakfield, Georgia annual Men and Women's Day will be Sunday, November 24th at 10 o'clock a.m. Guest churches will be Davis Chapel of Edison, Georgia, New William Grove Baptist Church, Zion Grove No. 1 Baptist Church, New Hope Baptist Church, and Mount Abel Baptist Church. Mother Aura Morris is the church mother. Deacon Paul Alford is the chairman of deacons. Reverend Tiller Sims is the pastor. Cornerstone Ministry Church of God by Faith Family and Friends Day will be observed today, Sunday, November 24th at 11 o'clock a.m. Elder James Patterson is the pastor. The St. King Baptist Church will honor Assistant Pastor Reverend Joyce Daniels today during the 10:15 a.m. worship service. First Lady Patricia Burnham will deliver the message. First Lady Patricia Burnham, clerk, Reverend Joyce Daniels, assistant pastor, Reverend Woody C. Burnham is the pastor. New St. Stephen's Church of Cordele 9th anniversary celebration for its pastor, Dr. Frankie Harmon, will climax today at 11 o'clock a.m. The pastor, Dr. Frankie Harmon, will deliver the message. Everyone is invited to attend. Dr. Frankie Harmon is the pastor. The Little Rock Baptist Church Thanksgiving Outreach will be today from 11 a.m. until 2 o'clock p.m. at the Cordele Agricultural Center located at 110 13th Avenue. Free hot meals, free coats, and clothing will be distributed. Everyone is invited. Reverend Joseph Green is the pastor. Hope in the Word Ministries of Cordele Thanksgiving Revival will begin on Monday, November 25th and continue to Tuesday, November 26th at 7 p.m. Bishop Arthur Fulton will be the guest speaker. Everyone is invited to attend. Pastor Calvin and Minister Melissa Hagerbrook, pastors. Zion Grove No. 2 Baptist Church annual Men and Women's Day service will be today at 10 o'clock a.m. Special guest churches will be the Fort Early Baptist Church, Zion Grove No. 1 Baptist Church, New Hope Baptist Church, Mount Abel Baptist Church, and William Grove Baptist Church. The William Grove Baptist Church will have a fundraising program on Sunday, November 30th at 3 o'clock p.m. All proceeds will be used to replace the roof of the church. Our program will be the Gospel Sunlighters of Cordele and many other groups. Sister Gradine Ford, Program Committee, Reverend Nikita Lester is the pastor. You're cordially invited to worship with the Greater Mars Tabernacle Baptist Church today. Sunday school at 9 o'clock a.m., worship service at 9:30 a.m. Mother Mary Henderson, Church Mother. Deacon Arthur L. Parker, Chairman of Deacons. Dr. K.M. Jwwilliams is the pastor. Everyone is invited to worship at the Gethsemane Baptist Church today. Worship service begins at 10:30 a.m. Deacon Johnny Wilson, Chairman of Deacons. Reverend Cecil Straughter is the pastor. You're invited to worship at the New Oak Grove Baptist Church. Sunday school begins at 9:15 a.m. Worship service at 10 o'clock a.m. Deacon Alonzo Jones, Chairman of Deacons. Reverend W.W. Wilson is the pastor. The Gum Creek Baptist Church extends a cordial invitation for you to worship with them today. Worship service begins at 10:30 a.m. Mother Norma Solomon, Church Mother. Deacon Zachary Fields, Chairman of Deacons. Reverend Joseph Hagerbrook is the pastor. Zion Hope Baptist Church of Winona invites everyone to worship with them today. Sunday school at 10:30 a.m. Worship service at 11:30 a.m. Deacon Xavier Bryant Sr. is the Chairman of Deacons. Reverend Willie James Belton is the pastor. You're invited to worship at the Emmanuel Baptist Church today. Sunday school at 10 o'clock a.m. Worship service at 11:15 a.m. Bible study is held each Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Mother Willie McGill, Church Mother. Reverend Gregory Williams is the pastor. You're cordially invited to worship at the Mount Calvary Baptist Church today. Sunday school at 9:45 a.m. Worship service at 10:45 a.m. Everyone has a cordial invitation to attend. Deacon Leon Spears, Chairman of Deacons. Reverend Isaac H. Owens is the pastor. The Cordial Crisp branch of the NAACP will have its regular monthly meeting this afternoon at 4 o'clock p.m. at Gillespie Selden Auditorium. The meeting will be held this afternoon at 4 o'clock p.m. at the Gillespie Selden Auditorium. All members and those interested in becoming members are asked to attend. Mrs. Kathy McGill, Branch Secretary. Reverend Isaac H. Owens, Branch President. That concludes our announcements for this morning.
And now for dedications. Our first selection this morning is dedicated to the following: in loving memory of Mrs. Sarita C. Hinton, who departed this life November 19, 2011. Dedication requested by her children, grandchildren, and the entire family. In loving memory of Deacon James Birch, who departed this life November 19, 1979. Dedication requested by the Birch family. One of Cordial Crisp County beloved civil rights leader, Deacon James Birch. In loving memory of Mr. Eddie Lee Ray, who would have celebrated his birthday November 21st, dedication requested by his beloved family. In loving memory of Mother Bobby May Fagan, who departed this life November 23rd, 2017, dedication requested by her children, Mrs. Gail Grant, Mrs. Lucy Baker, Deacon Jimmy Fagan, and Miss Lavonza Fagan, the grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and the entire family. In loving memory of Mr. Broadus Lamar, who departed this life November 23rd, dedication requested by the Lamar family. In loving memory of Mr. Benjamin Murray, who would have celebrated his birthday November 25th, dedication requested by the Hardeman, Cobb, Preston families. In loving memory of Mrs. Minnie Lamar, who departed this life, dedication requested by the family. In loving memory of educator Mrs. Carolyn Brooks, who would have celebrated her birthday November 27th, and also in loving memory of Deacon Oscar Brooks, chairman, who would have celebrated his birthday November 26th, dedication requested by Deacon S. Carey Brooks and the entire family. In loving memory of Mr. Ernest Brown, who departed this life November 28, 2003, dedication requested by the Brown family. In loving memory, retired educator Mrs. Gabrielle Demery, who would have celebrated her birthday November 29, dedication requested by the Demery family. Our first selection this morning is dedicated to the following. Happy birthday to Miss Edna Clay, who celebrated her birthday Saturday, November 16, dedication requested by the Clay family. Happy birthday to Mrs. Brenda Fletcher Green, who is celebrating her birthday today, November 24th, dedication dedication requested by her beloved family. Happy birthday to Miss Sabrina Fields, who will celebrate her birthday November 26th. Dedication requested by her husband, Mr. Norman Fields. And happy birthday to Miss O'Day Carr, who will celebrate her birthday Thursday, November 28th. Dedication requested by her husband and her beloved children. Our first selection this morning is dedicated to the following: Deacon James Smith and family, Deacon George Jordan and family, Deacon Jerome Jordan and family, Vienna, Georgia. Past Commissioner A.J. and Mother Vera Rivers and family, Deacon and Mrs. Willie James Patrick and family, Mother Willie Mae Leary and family of Hatley, Georgia, Mother Martha Westbrook and family, Mrs. Melba Carter and family, Mrs. Isaiah Carter and family, Commissioner Vesta Bill Shepherd and the entire Bill family, Chris County Coroner Deacon Ricky Dawson, Deaconess Martha Ann Cross and family, Bishop Arthur West and Elder Lorraine West, and a member of the Evangelistic Tabernacle Family Outreach Center of Vienna, Georgia, Elder Randy West and family, Mrs. China Ezel and the staff of BJ's Diner, the Reverend Jimmy Felton and family, the Reverend and Mrs. Willie James Felton and family, the entire Felton family, Deacon and Mrs. Ronnie Morris and family, Mother Aura Rockwell Morris and family, Deacon and Mrs. Paul Alfred and family, the Honorable Juanita Kinchin, Mayor of the City of Warwick, Georgia, Mother Willie Mae Walker and family, Deacon Frank and Sister Gloria Mays and family, Minister Verdell Thomas and family, the Reverend Woody and Mrs. Patricia Barnum and family, and the members of the St. King Baptist Church, Ms. Willie Mae Craft and family, Mr. Silas and Mrs. Doretha Didell and family, the members of the Big Bethel Baptist Church of DeSoto, Georgia. It is certainly with the deepest regret that we make the following announcements. Mr. Buford Royal Sr., better known as Pete, age 90, of 206 West 18th Avenue, Cordele, Georgia, died Tuesday, November 19th, at the Phoebe Putnam Memorial Hospital in Albany, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Buford Royal Sr., better known as Pete, age 90, will be held today, Sunday, November 24th at 10 a.m. in the chapel of the Jwwilliams Funeral Home in Cordele, Georgia. The Reverend Isaac H. Owens, pastor of the Mount Calvary Baptist Church, will officiate. The burial will follow at the Bethel Cemetery in Cordele, Georgia. Dr. James Wardell Bolton II, age 54, of 1800 Wesleyan Drive, Macon, Georgia, died Sunday, November 17th at the Piedmont Hospital in Atlanta, Georgia. The funeral service for Dr. James Wardell Bolton II, age 54, will be held today, Sunday, November 24th at 2 p.m. in the chapel of the Jwwilliams Funeral Home in Cordele, Georgia. Elder James Patterson will officiate. His beloved cousin, Elder Terrence Walker, will deliver the eulogy. The burial will follow at the Sunnyside Cemetery in Cordele, Georgia. United States Army veteran, the Reverend Edward Bernard Childs, age 79, of 858 Shadow Ridge Drive, Southeast Atlanta, Georgia, died Tuesday, November 19th at Piedmont Hospital in Atlanta, Georgia. The funeral service for United States Army veteran, the Reverend Edward Bernard Childs, age 79, will be held Tuesday, November 26th at 11 a.m. in the sanctuary of the Forest Chapel Baptist Church in Pinehurst, Georgia. The pastor, Reverend Willie Green, will officiate. The burial with military honors will follow in the churchyard cemetery. Mrs. Emma Lee Morgan Collier, age 67, of 214 West 28th Avenue, Cordele, Georgia, died Tuesday, November 19th at her residence in Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mrs. Emma Lee Morgan Collier, age 67, will be held on Saturday, November 30th at 10 a.m. in the sanctuary of the New Oak Grove Baptist Church in Cordele, Georgia. The pastor, Reverend W. Wilson, will officiate. The burial will follow at the Bethel Cemetery in Cordele, Georgia. Mr. Jack James Lane Jr., age 77, of 162 Mitchell Street, DeSoto, Georgia, died Thursday, November 21st at the Phoebe Sumter Medical Center in Americus, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Jack Lane Jr., age 77, will be held on Saturday, November 30th in the sanctuary of the Ship Chapel Baptist Church in Americus, Georgia. The pastor, Reverend Daniel Clinton, will officiate. The burial will follow at the Eastview Cemetery in Americus, Georgia. The public visitation will be Friday, November 29th from 1 until 5 p.m. at the Jwwilliams Funeral Home. Mr. Wilman Lorenza Tyson Sr., age 79, of 144 Georgia Highway 308, Plains, Georgia, died Friday, November 22nd at the Phoebe Putnam Memorial Hospital in Albany, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Wilma Lorenza Tyson Sr., age 79, will be announced at a later date pending the completion of the arrangements. The Jwwilliams funeral directors serving Cordele and Vienna are in charge of each of these arrangements during this week. This selection this morning is dedicated to the bereaved families whose loved ones were laid to rest during the past week. The family of retired educator Miss Geneva Bridges of Powder Springs, Georgia. The family of Miss Mary Louise Trotman Trahan of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mrs. Linda Gail Bullard Jones of Cobb, Georgia. The family of Miss Juanita Cookie Jones of Cordele, Georgia, and Rochelle, Georgia. This selection is dedicated to the bereaved families whose loved ones will be laid to rest during this week. The family of Mr. Buford Royal Sr. of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Dr. James Wardell Bolton II of Macon, Georgia, and Cordele, Georgia. The family of United States Army veteran, the Reverend Edward B. Childs of Atlanta, Georgia, formerly of Pinehurst, Georgia. The family of Mrs. Emma Lee Morgan Collier of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mr. James Lane Jr. of DeSoto, Georgia. The family of Mr. Wilma Lorenzo Tyson Sr. of Plains, Georgia. This election is dedicated to all of the sick and shut-in, to all patients in the local and surrounding hospitals, nursing homes, and rehabilitation centers, to our beloved ministers and their devoted family members, to all retired educators, to the men and women serving in armed forces, both stateside and abroad, to all veterans, and to everyone who listens to our program on each Sunday morning. It's a pleasure for us to bring it to you. Our program goes out in memory of our past president, Dr. Napoleon Williams, to my wife, Mrs. Calandra Wilkerson Parker, to my son, Jai Wilkerson Parker. The This selection goes out to my brother, retired Chief Master Sergeant Norman F. Dexter, and his wife, Dr. Gwendolyn Maxine Dexter, their grandson, Noble. Goes out to my sister, Mrs. Patsy Jackson, and her husband, Mr. Jim Jackson of Cordele, Georgia. This selection goes out to my nephew, Deacon Kenneth Smith, program chairman of the Greater Morris Tabernacle Baptist Church, and here with us this morning presenting our program to our Facebook watchers and YouTube watchers. This program goes out to our pastor, Dr. K.M. Williams, and his wife, Sister Kathy Williams, and the entire Williams family of Cordele and Albany, Georgia. This election goes out to our beloved Mrs. Easter May Sanders and family. Goes out to Mr. Cleveland R. Lemon, oldest staff member of the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. Goes out to our dear friend and brother longstanding, the Reverend Johnny Dean, pastor of the New Poplar Spring Baptist Church of Byronville, Georgia, and our good brother, Deacon Jimmy Charles Mumford, to his wife, Sister Carol Mumford, and the entire Mumford family, Deacon Mrs. Sam Mumford and family. This election goes out to each and every one, and we do wish you a blessed and happy Thanksgiving coming up this week. God bless you this fourth Sunday in November 2024. God bless you. Goes out to my cousin, Deacon Emery Wright, and the entire Wright family for this Thanksgiving weekend coming up. God bless you.
Thank you for joining us this morning. We hope you've enjoyed our program. Tune in again on next Sunday morning. And remember, in your time of need, contact the competent, capable, and dependable staff at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home.